Deputy Donnchadh Laoghaire.
Cormagat Ceann Corlags, but I'm fáilte Glocka Riven Ara, I'm sauce will and Ara Sheen. I'm glad that the Senior Minister is here to deal with this issue. Minister, the Garda Commissioner 2 weeks ago announced a ban on Garda overtime, causing, as I've said previously, considerable concern among Gardaí, the GRA and indeed the public as a whole. Now, something like this occurred last year as well, but for a much shorter period, and ultimately funding was sound. It arose on that occasion in December. This year, we are facing a ban that lasts the full 3 months left in the year. I am concerned that the scale of the pullback in policing this will cause will have potentially serious ramifications for crime and for community safety. Due to the lack of frontline Gardaí, overtime has become a fact of life. You talk to sergeants, you talk to superintendents, and they will say it is essential just to keep a station and a district functioning on a very basic level. Stations cannot function properly without it. And the reality is that most Garda stations, for all the Minister's talk, most Garda stations in the country are still only running to standstill, even with additional probationers. Every Garda sub-district, or practically every Garda sub-district and division, is down numbers since 2010 and 2011. And just to give you a flavour of that, Minister, just in terms of Cork, Blackrock is down from 31 to 22. Ballincollig is down from 23 to 19. Watercourse Road is down 50 to 45. And Toker is down from 61 to 59. Right across the division, that's 22 additional Gardaí, from 700 to 678, and reality is much more than that, because there has been a centralisation of senior Gardaí and specialist units. So who will take the place of those upwards of, in reality, 22 Gardaí? Overtime takes that place. Those Gardaí do that bit more, fill those gaps, and overtime is provided for that, and it's approved. In the absence of that, operations and ordinary patrols will not proceed. To try and fill the gaps, to try and keep adequate people rostered and keep patrols on the go, as well as checkpoints, you need overtime. A ban of this kind is a very blunt instrument. An outright ban, which is essentially what this is, means we are heading in for a long winter, with Gardaí being pulled and stretched in every direction. The Christmas period, in particular, often sees an increase in crime, burglaries and public order issues in particular, as well as managing major events, increased road traffic and checkpoints. They are going to be expected to do all this with only the very basic resources. Now, the Minister will tell me, as Commissioner Harris has said, that overtime will still be available for specific policing and security operations, but only with the approval of the relevant Assistant Commissioner, following discussion with the Deputy Commissioner in charge of policing and security. But that every single piece of additional overtime sought by any station in the country will have to go up to the desk of two of the most senior Gardaí in the country. Officers have been advised that it should only be incurred if approved in exceptional circumstances. So either those two senior Gardaí are going to spend the rest of the year going through reasonable overtime applications, or, far more likely, a lot of sergeants and superintendents will take it that they are not meant to ask. In the meantime, a lot of work that the Gardaí would do and want to do would not happen. Last week, I paid tribute to the fact that the Gardaí have had significant successes in recent times in tackling the scourge of serious and organised crimes. Now, some of that was major operations and investigations and intelligence-led, but there was also a significant role for a serious rollout of checkpoints and surveillance. Will this now all be sanctioned? Will we see the patrols on the street where we need them? A lack of overtime will seriously hamper the ability of the Gardaí to continue with these operations. The Minister needs to meet. He said he meets with them regularly. He needs to meet specifically with the GRA on this issue. He needs to meet specifically with Commissioner Harris to see how this can be resolved, because I am very concerned that this is not going to work over 3 months.
Thank you, Ceann Corlags. I listened carefully to the Deputy, and I want in the first instance to clarify that it's the Garda Commissioner who is responsible for the allocation of the very substantial budget that An Garda Síochána receives. I do not politically interfere in policing matters, nor indeed do I direct the Commissioner where to deploy resources. The allocation of Garda resources is a matter for the Commissioner, in the light indeed of his identified operational demands and arrangements for Garda overtime. This is not a matter for which I, as Minister for Justice, have a direct responsibility. This is in accordance with the law. I refer the Deputy to the Garda Síochána Act 2005, under which the Garda Commissioner is the accounting officer for the Garda vote and is responsible for the effective and efficient use of the resources at his disposal. Indeed, moreover, under the same Act, the Commissioner is responsible for directing and controlling the Garda Síochána and for carrying on and managing generally the administration and business on Garda Síochána. I do, however, wish to take the opportunity to again confirm the Government's firm commitment to supporting Garda Síochána and ensuring that the organisation is appropriately resourced. The resources available to Garda Síochána have reached unprecedented levels, with a provision this year of more than €1.6 billion, including the allocation of €98.5 million for overtime. As I've said, the allocation of these resources is a matter for the Commissioner in the light of his identified operational demands. I'm informed by the Garda authorities that expenditure on overtime to the end of September this year amounted to €95.1 million. I'm further informed that in order to limit the projected overspend for this year, the Commissioner has directed a number of measures to effectively manage Garda resources and limit the need for additional public funding. I'm informed by the Garda authorities that these measures include the cancellation of overtime for administrative purposes, to ensure that frontline policing services have the required resources for the remainder of this year. I understand that some other measures have also been put in place in relation to overtime. For example, Garda management has been directed to ensure that Garda duties such as attendance of Garda members at courts and in the management of prison escorts are undertaken on regular tours as opposed to on overtime. A range of other measures to reduce expenditure across a number of other subheads, including, for example, travel and subsistence, were also introduced to limit the need for additional funding. Management of Garda resources by the Commissioner in this way does not equate to a ban on overtime, as mentioned by the Deputy. Indeed, as I've said, I'm informed that the cancellation of overtime for administrative purposes is precisely to ensure that frontline policing services continue with sufficient and adequate resources. And I've been informed by the Garda authorities that all essential policing operations, such as Operation Thor, will continue as before. We should also take the opportunity to remind the House that Garda overtime cannot be considered in isolation. We're making tangible progress on achieving the Government's vision for an overall Garda workforce of 21,000 personnel by 2021, comprising 15,000 Garda members, 4,000 civilians. Since the opening of the Garda College in Templemore in September 2014, almost 2,200 new recruits have attested as members of Garda Síochána, and they've all been assigned to mainstream duties across the country, including Cork. This will continue. It's also the case that unprecedented investment now being made in Garda ICT infrastructure, €342 million between 16 and 21, will enable Garda to deliver on reform, work more efficiently, deploy the latest cutting-edge technologies in delivering professional policing and security services of the community, as indeed conceded by Deputy Laoghaire. I want to conclude by repeating the key realities here. Management of the Garda budget, including overtime, management and control of Garda Síochána, are matters which by law fall to the Garda Commissioner.
Minister, I have to say I'm disappointed by the response, and I'm fairly sure that people listening in will be disappointed with it too. At the end of the day, you are the paymaster, Minister, and there are budgetary issues for the Garda Síochána. Some of that may be to do with their management of their own resources. I think there has to be a better way of approaching this than this blunt instrument that has been put before it. And you may say that it's not a ban, but when you're asking districts and divisions to clear the test that has been set for them, I think that's as good as an overall ban. Minister, you're the paymaster. You are also the person who has the greatest political accountability for Garda Síochána and for its role in tackling crime, in preventing crime and in community safety. And Minister, if this becomes a difficulty over the course of this winter, I wouldn't be surprised if you started singing a different tune. I think that you should head this off at the pass, Minister. I think that you should seek to meet the GRA. There's nothing to prevent you doing that under any statute. You meet them regularly. Meet them on this specific issue. Hear what they have to say. Let them outline the implications this will have. I want to read out from John O'Keefe there of the Garda Representative Association. He says, "This is an extraordinary development, as overtime has only ever occurred where necessary and must be approved in advance. Where the requirement continues to exist, it is clear evidence of a resourcing issue. Overtime is essential if our members are to provide an effective policing service to the general public in Dublin and across the country." He further said, we need to be especially conscious of the signal this directive sends to the criminal fraternity. So there's very serious concerns there being expressed by the GRA, and I think that they are very much warranted. This will mean, no matter what way you cut it, less hours means less policing, means less Garda visibility on the street. And Minister, you're going to be answerable for that. So there's time to resolve this. There's 3 months left. It's already very likely beginning to cut, but I believe you should head this off the pass, meet with the GRA and try and explore alternatives.
Minister Flanagan.
I'm concerned, as Ceann Comhairle, to ensure that any potential misunderstanding on this issue is firmly avoided. Management of Garda overtime is not a matter for which I have responsibility as Minister. Budgetary provision for Garda Síochána is more than €1.6 billion, including an allocation of almost €100 million for overtime. Allocation of these resources is a matter for the Commissioner in the light of his identified operational demands. I'm informed by the Garda authorities in response to the projected overspend for this year that the Commissioner has directed a number of measures to effectively manage the resources on Garda Síochána. I want to ensure that the measures are such that frontline policing services that have required resources for the remainder of the year are intact. And I've been informed that all essential policing operations, such as Operation Thor, will continue as before. I do not accept that there's a ban on overtime. I do not consider the actions of the Garda Commissioner as a ban on overtime. Nor can overtime be taken in isolation to the other resources available to on Garda Síochána. As I said, significant capital investment in Garda ICT, in Garda Fleet. We are making real progress in increasing the numbers in order to achieve my targets for the next 3 years. Under the governance and oversight arrangements in place between my department and Garda Síochána, there's regular structured engagement between Garda Síochána and all relevant parties in relation to resources, including overtime as appropriate. But let me say clearly, as Ceann Comhairle, it's for the Garda management to manage effectively and efficiently the significant resource being made available to them in accordance with operational need. And the Commissioner has my support, and the Commissioner has the support of the Government fully.
Oh my God.